Greetings and salutations, fellow book readers. This is Mark, and the book I will review today is The Old Man and the Sea. Before we continue, this is personalized limited edition of The Old Man and the Sea with leather cover designed and made by me. At the end of the video, I will tell you a couple of ways of how you can get one for yourself if you are interested. Now let's get back to the review. The Old Man and the Sea is a short novel by Ernest Hemingway. It was the last fiction published during his life, and one that greatly contributed, maybe was even decisive in his win of the 1954 Nobel for Literature. Hemingway was a giant of American literature and probably the most responsible for bringing it onto the world stage. He was declared by some the greatest writer since Shakespeare, but that's very subjective. Hemingway's trademark was the simple and direct prose, combined with complex characters and vivid description of the action and scenery. It is tragic he committed suicide when he was 60 years old, right when he probably was reaching his best writing years. And because of it, we might have missed more of some great literature. Or maybe Hemingway knew he was over his peak and there was nothing more to give. Writing might have kept him alive longer than otherwise, considering the history of suicides in his family. Hemingway seems to have been somewhat unstable psychologically and often controlled by his emotions, effeminate, even though in his writings he comes across as a very masculine and in control figure. He was considered a symbol of manliness, a war veteran, womanizer, hunter, and fisherman. I think Charles Bukowski said that for Hemingway, life was a long, never-ending war, and the plots of his novels and stories seem to reflect this, including The Old Man and the Sea. What is The Old Man and the Sea about? On the surface, it is man versus nature, but the message of the story is much deeper. It is about life becoming more difficult as you age, the contrast, even fight, between finality and weakness of old age, and the hope and effort for something more. There is still a possibility for great or even the greatest performance, even though the probability is pretty high it will be your last one and might even kill you. The message seems to be, don't give up. But man is not made for defeat, he said. A man can be destroyed, but not defeated. The novel is trying to challenge the passage of time and prove that in spite of old age, we are still capable to go on living effectively, and catching the largest fish of your life makes it not only believable, but real. A bit of the plot. The story focuses on the old Cuban fisherman, Santiago, who has gone over 80 days without catching any fish. He has been labeled as unlucky by the people in the village, and the young boy, Manolin, who was helping him, is taken away by his father. But the old man doesn't give up and continues to go out on the sea regularly. Finally, good fortune smiles on him and he hooks a huge marlin, and the long and painful fight starts. After he kills the fish, he faces a new challenge of bringing it to the shore, which creates a new fight. And that's the basic plot. What are my thoughts about The Old Man and the Sea? This is the best of Hemingway, or just best of any fiction. The story might be difficult for some readers to relate, but the prose makes up for it. I think to connect with the plot, there is a need of experience, and experience cannot be acquired from reading, but only from living. And this means having the age, or we could call it maturity, to understand different stages of life. He was too simple to wonder when he had attained humility, but he knew he had attained it, and he knew it was not disgraceful, and it carried no loss of true pride. There is a kind of simplicity in The Old Man that only comes with age, when you start seeing what is really important in life, and many superficialities that occupied us earlier drift into background. This simplicity creates deep internal peace, and it brings out a feeling of dignity about that person. On the other hand, there is still a lot of pride left in the old man. He refuses to give up and doesn't accept defeat nor help. So when the boy realizes the old man is going hungry and tries to get some food for him, he has to do it indirectly, hidden, not to offend the old man's pride. This shows the ongoing struggle between tranquility of old age and youthful pride, taking comfort in one but not wanting to let go of the other. I think this is a common problem many aging people face, acceptance of new reality. The importance of the young boy, Manolin, seems to be to show the contrast between the boy coming to his manhood and the old man losing it. You bought me a beer, the old man said. You are already a man. The boy also reminds him of his own youth when retelling his stories and makes him remember his past, some of it painful, such as his dead wife, and that's why he decided to remove her picture from the wall of their hut, where now he is living alone. The conversations with the boy seem to keep the fight in the old man. The stories of his youth give him some pleasant contrast to his present existence as an old man, and the only escape from this struggle are his dreams. He no longer dreamed of storms, nor of women, nor of great occurrences, nor of great fish, nor fights, nor contests of strength, nor of his wife. He only dreamed of places now, and the lions on the beach. They played like young cats in the dusk, and he loved them as he loved the boy. He never dreamed about the boy. The old man remembers things, people that are no longer there. It reminds me an interview I saw with the famous American travel writer Paul Theroux, where he says that all these young people come up to him and tell him about all the exotic places they had visited, and he thinks, I have been somewhere you cannot go, the past. Well, the old man remembers the world that is gone, and he himself probably feels slowly disappearing, and the only connection to his past is fishing. The struggle and pain of it is probably the only thing that makes him feel that he is still alive, and the hope for the next catch, one more win, might be keeping him alive. Further, all the memories of everything that is gone create the feeling of loneliness, which are much more present in the old people, because the list of what is no longer here is much longer. And also, all people spend more time alone, recalling their past. No one should be alone in their old age, he thought. The feeling of loneliness is stimulated by people around you, your contemporaries, slowly dying off. You remember the experiences you shared with them. There might be younger people around you, but the connection is not the same. Actually, their behavior reminds you how old or different you are from them, thus you feel more alone. Before writing The Old Man and the Sea, maybe even extending through it, Hemingway went through a period of depression, likely brought by many of his friends, Yeats, Ford Madox Ford, F. Scott Fitzgerald, Gertrude Stein, and a few others slowly dying off through the 1940s. And it probably reminded him of his own mortality and the approaching end. The importance of the before-mentioned individuals to Hemingway is relayed in his other book from the same period, the 1950s, The Movable Feast. To add to all these gloomy events, later he had a couple of plane crashes which left him in pain and somewhat physically disabled, and all of it led to further depression and the suicide. The story also portrays Cuba before the revolution, when Hemingway happily lived there. I imagine for the people like the old man, the revolution didn't impact their life much. They probably still went on fishing, surviving, somewhat isolated from the national politics. It might have been the type of simplicity Hemingway, later in his life, yearned for, since the revolution forced him to choose stay in Cuba or maintain his connection with the United States. He couldn't do both. He already lost Spain when Franco won the Civil War and converted the country into a fascist dictatorship. So Cuba was another happy home he felt expelled from, and it must have contributed to his feelings of loneliness and depression. The story itself seems to be a metaphor for life and living. Hemingway uses a fishing story because he was an avid fisherman himself, maybe even felt most alive when doing it. The sea represents life with all the obstacles and surprises it puts into one's way. He always thought of the sea as la mar, which is what people call her in Spanish when they love her. Sometimes those who love her say bad things of her, but they are always said as though she were a woman. Some of the younger fishermen, those who used buoys as floats for their lines and had motorboats bought when the shark livers had brought much money, spoke of her as Elmar, which is masculine. They spoke of her as a contestant or a place or even an enemy. But the old man always thought of her as feminine and as something that gave or withheld great favors, and if she did wild or wicked things, it was because she could not help them. Fishing represents the individual life of a man and the efforts to get through it. It is part of life, but also can be seen as the microcosm of it. When young, the success is based on strength and energy, and when older, it comes from the experience gained over time and the tricks learned. During the fight with the fish, the old man suffers and feels hunger, thirst, physical exhaustion, but also contentment and happiness, just like during one's life. The fishing seems to keep the old man alive, since it is something that keeps him active and gives some meaning to his life. And when the good fortune smiles at him in the form of his catch, the sharks appear and try to steal it, just like it happens in real life. Further, fishing is a fight, not unlike boxing. Hemingway was an amateur boxer and enjoyed the fighting very much, and often challenged people he knew to a friendly bout. He introduced some elements of it into fishing, his own and in the novel. The old man analyzes the fish and tries to anticipate its moves. Also, one of his hands is weaker and he wishes he trained it harder. He treats the fish as an opponent in a duel to death. It seems very personal. I wish I could feed the fish, he thought. He is my brother, but I must kill him and keep strong to do it. Finally, after a long and somewhat poetic fight, he kills the fish. As I mentioned before, for Hemingway, life was a war, never ending, and he considered it a battle to the death. And this motive is present in many of his stories. For example, Death in the Afternoon, where he uses bullfighting as another metaphor for life. There's also Hemingway's struggle with fate present in the novel. Jesus was a fisherman, so it might have created a religious connection with the story. You did not kill the fish only to keep alive and to sell for food, he thought. You killed him for pride and because you are a fisherman. You loved him when he was alive and you loved him after. If you love him, it is not a sin to kill him, or is it more? Maybe Hemingway wondered if it was a sin to kill marriage for somebody you loved. He converted to Catholicism to marry his second wife, whom he later divorced to marry another woman. It might have had left him morally confused about religion, his relation to it, and maybe he wondered how great of a sinner he was. To sum it up, Hemingway's writing is somewhat simple and direct, but powerful and gets its message across. And The Old Man and the Sea is the pinnacle of it. He himself said about it, the best I can write ever for all of my life. When the old man had gaffed her and clubbed her, holding the rapier bill with its sandpaper edge and clubbing her across the top of her head until her color turned to a color almost like the backing of mirrors, and then, with the boy's aid, hoisted her aboard. The male fish had stayed by the side of the boat. Then, while the old man was clearing the lines and preparing the harpoon, the male fish jumped high into the air beside the boat to see where the female was and then went down deep. His lavender wings, that were his pectoral fins, spread wide and all his white lavender stripes showing. He was beautiful, the old man remembered, and he had stayed. The story feels very personal, and it was probably the result of Hemingway's realization and apprehension about getting old, but not wanting to give in to it. He uses a fishing story as a metaphor and also as a conduit for his feelings, since he was an avid and passionate fisherman, especially deep sea fishing. Maybe fishing was as big of a passion as writing. Well, there was also big game hunting, Actually, the story could have been about a hunter. Fishing can be considered a form of hunting. Maybe it was easier to make connection to faith and Jesus through fishing. To be honest, I prefer to read Hemingway without analyzing it, just enjoying the beautiful prose. There are a couple of adaptations of The Old Man and the Sea. There is the 1958 film with Spencer Tracy and the 1990s version with Anthony Quinn. Both of them are pretty good, and since it is a short novel, they retell the story very well. Okay, let's talk about the physical book. The book I am holding is a paperback which I transform into hardcover leather-bound edition. To make the cover, I use grade A naturally tan hide I buy from a tanner in North Spain. It is the same leather Louis Vuitton uses to make his bags, so it is top quality. I do all the processing of the leather myself. First, I design the cover, and for this, I use a painting of an old man fighting great marlin with a harpoon in his hands, ready to strike the final blow. This is the back with the blurb, and inside front cover, I printed a quote from the book. If you want to see a more detailed video where I explain how I transform paperback into leather-bound hardcover, click on the link in the description. I will make a maximum of 100 editions of each title. Each one will be numbered and initial, and the numbers will go in chronological order from 2 up, since number 1 stays with me. The price will be around $100, so if you would like me to make one for you, you can click below on my email and send me a message. I do not guarantee I will do it, since it will depend on the time I have available, access to leather, and if I can get my hands on the copy of the book. Now, if you're not willing to spend $100, but you still want the book, what you can do is click below on the PayPal link and donate $3 or more to my channel. And for every 100 donations, I will make a lottery and draw one name, and the winner will receive the book. So if you are cheap but feel lucky, this might be the way to do it. Also, your donations give me the extra motivation to make the book reviews, and I appreciate them very much. So thank you in advance. One more thing, when you make your donation, remember to include the title of the book you would like to win. The book itself is beautiful. Visually, it has a very nice texture, it smells great, and the more you handle it, the more beautiful it will become. And it makes a great gift for yourself or somebody who appreciates books. So if you want one, don't snooze or you might lose. Well, that's it, so let's end it here. And until next time, keep your ear close to the ground and read a book. Adios.